Okay, so what we're doing here, we're going to break down, go around the table, our 5 favorite arcade games of all time.
Yeah.
Reiner, do you want to start with number 5? We can just go down the line.
Oh, number 5. Yeah, I'm going to go a little something called Moon Patrol. Does anybody know what that is?
I know Moon Patrol.
Maybe have seen it.
I played it again when we went to the Up-Down recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did.
What is this thing?
It is a side-scrolling shooter, kind of. It has an element of platforming, kind of like almost like Super Meat Boy, where you have to be very precise in your timing to jump over rocks and little like...
The jumps are really hard.
Yeah, like little gaps, but at the same time, there's like flying saucers going overhead. You are a little buggy, like a 6-wheel buggy, part of the Moon Patrol. There's aliens on the moon, by the way.
Oh, good Christ, no.
They're taking over. But it's one of those games where you just kind of get this zen-like state where you're like locked in and you can own and control that machine, getting like, I think the first Extra Life was at like 10,000 points. And I could do that like with my eyes closed at one point. You know, like that became so easy, but then it'd be like 25,000, 50,000, something like that.
Yeah.
But I would just, like if I saw that in an arcade, like if I was traveling or something and I saw it, that'd be the first machine I'd go to. Even if there's new stuff there, it's like, I got to play Moon Patrol.
Just because you have the muscle memory down.
Yeah, and it's just so much fun. Like, I thought it was such a great game.
Do you remember who made it?
Irem?
Irem? Okay.
I want to see. Let me see. I got some data on it.
Oh.
Yeah, Irem, 1982, parallax scrolling. Yeah.
Famous for its parallax scrolling. Moon Patrol. I should play it at some point. All right.
It's good.
It's at Up-Down.
Yeah. I always just walked right past it. It's some dorky sci-fi
Check it out.
game. Who the hell wants it? Andy, number 5.
First of all, I want to say this was hard. There were a lot of games I have a lot of great memories with, and I left some games up that I think are major parts of what I like about games. But I definitely tried to pick ones that I think they're just amazing games, right? And I think that they've held on and they're still amazing to this day, even like that they didn't really kind of fall apart, I guess, to some degree, which some did. Like an example of that would be like I loved Dragon's Lair when it came out, but it's not that great of a game, but right. I really enjoyed it. But at number 5, I put a game that I still think holds its own today and has had some new versions recently, which is Tempest.
Oh, Tempest 4000 just came out this week.
I know. I played it, actually. I was playing it yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Tempest is one of my favorites. It's a game that really feels best in the arcade with the dial. And I just think it's unique. It's always had cool graphics. Like even the graphics today remind me of the original graphics with the kind of vector style. So that to me is an all-time favorite and Hall of Fame easy choice.
Okay,
Tempest.
so help me out with this dial thing. So it's just like a physical dial that you're rotating as you go around the tunnel and shoot these aliens.
Like this big.
Yeah, I mean,
it's massive wheel.
Well, it has different. It's not. It's a fairly simple, almost like the old Atari 2600 kind of dial kind of thing. It's just on. There, and it goes because you slide along the lines, and you've got like basically like it looks like kind of like a C, right, that crawls along, and you shoot spiders and spikes that come up towards you to like control the battle, but you have to like kind of move along, slide along. You don't.
Yeah.
And then like at the end, like you kind of warp to the next area. You need to like dodge things and things like that. So it's a bit of a skill, just learning how to navigate going around on the web. Yeah. And then shooting is a different level, and then you kind of have like...
And it feels like you're moving down a tunnle, which is really cool.
Right.
Yeah, like you're kind of... it's got a perspective to it, so it has a little bit of a 3D effect to it. And it's a game that, like when it's a circle one, like it's funny because it kind of screws with you because you're still going that way. You know what I mean? As you start to do like loop-de-loops, as you like kind of take things out. It's a fun game. It's challenging. It's a little thing to later. It's not my favorite shooter ever, but it's close.
Okay, all right.
It's really close.
Did you enjoy your time with 4000?
Yeah, I did actually. I want to play it a lot more. I just loaded it up and kind of spent like maybe 30, 45 minutes playing and kind of figuring out what like the changes were and whether I wanted to use the keyboard or if I wanted to use a D-pad.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to use as an input a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I want to play it a lot more. I mean, I love Tempest 2000, another kind of take on that came to console. Atari Jaguar was, I mean, I bought a Jaguar because Tempest 2000 is so amazing. I love Tempest 2000. It had like kind of a great soundtrack, and I enjoy that kind of, it's kind of like the first like kind of Pac-Man Championship edition that eventually come along. I feel like Tempest was one of the first to kind of break into like new kind of Geometry Wars, Particle Fests that they kind of put into the
Yeah,
games.
and I was kind of
fun.
struck that like 4000, it doesn't feel very modern. It seems very old school. Like I know
It feels
Jeff
very old
Gerstmann,
school, yeah.
I played a little bit as well, but I know Jeff Gerstmann at Giant Bomb, he was talking about how it kind of feels exactly like 2000. Like it's not that different ultimately.
No,
for the
not really.
4000 version of this thing, but
But I don't care.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, sure, I'll play it. You know, I'll take any excuse to play Tempest.
yeah, for sure. Kyle, number 5.
Yeah. So my list is very like specific to me and like exactly
Perfect.
Well, I mean, because even
Well, so is mine. Like, I wouldn't put Moon Patrol on any greatest ever list.
yeah, but
Yeah.
like Dragon's Lair.
Yeah.
Like I would have kept that on my list. Just talking to you in the past about like how much you played that game. and
You're a
stuff like
nostalgic beast, Kyle.
that. Yeah. So my number 5 is Virtual on Cyber Troopers,
Okay.
which was at my local skating rink. Is where I
I
remember
feel
that
like
one.
these are gonna be the top 5 games that were at your local skating rink.
Actually, I
A
think
skating rink, was it like ice skating rink or like a roller
like
rink?
roller.
Oh,
Actually,
yeah.
I think that's my only one actually. To
Okay.
spoil it, but yeah, that there and it's the thing about it was I just really because it's like a dual. It was like my first experience with like dual analog kind of. You have two
Okay.
control sticks and you're controlling a robot's movement with the left stick and then shooting with the right, and it's like third person versus another robot. And it wasn't even that I really enjoyed fighting another robot. Like I think I would have liked it more if it was like a campaign. But it's the first time I remember like really feeling like I was in control of like a mech or something. Like, I have those two control sticks. So yeah, I really like that game a lot.
And it's a Sega thing, right?
Yeah, it's Sega. It was called Cyber. I was looking it up. It was called Virtual on Cyber Troopers. I guess it was going to be called Cyber Troopers in North America and Virtual on in Japan. But then they just were like, yeah, let's just like combine all 4 words together into one.
Why
name
not?
for both
As many
places.
cool words as we can cram into this thing as possible.
Yeah, but yeah, I really like that. It's funny because it's one that I really loved playing in the arcade. But when I think I got like there was a PS2 port, and I remember taking that home and like being like, oh, this is way less fun without the 2 control sticks. You know,
Yeah, you need
analog sticks just don't do it any justice. For sure.
Yeah, there is something beautiful, even like going to a barcade scene, you know,
Yeah.
we're just like jumping from machine to machine and just feeling how unique each layout is and how the tightness of the control stick, everything's just amazing and different.
yeah. So that game was really cool. I like that one a lot.
Yeah. My number 5 is also very nostalgic for me, but it's also like, it's the heavy hitter. We have to talk about it at some point. So please jump in. But Donkey Kong. Realistically, like on this crappy Coleco version that was like portable, you know, I think it's like the first game I ever played in my life was probably Donkey Kong. So even playing in the arcades, it'll always make me happy. And so looking up, it's like, you know, people know the story of Donkey Kong a little bit, but it's still wild to look at. Like Miyamoto and the team made it in like 4 months.
And it was they tweaked radar scope, right? Was the which was like a game that wasn't doing well in North America. So they're like, hey, new guy, why don't you fix this and make it, you know, use the tech but make something new with it. It's like, all right, I'll make one of the most iconic games of all time.
No big deal.
I guess.
And then the legend that like they were trying to get the Popeye license and like retrofit it with new characters and all that stuff. But also like apparently there were originally going to be sound effects in Donkey Kong, or like voices, I should say specifically, to the point that like originally every time you jumped over a barrel, they wanted Pauline to yell "nice." Instead of like the classic jump sound from Donkey Kong. Wouldn't they get annoying just to have her yell nice over and over and over
so she
again?
would it be just, I would love to hear what that was. Was it like a very excited nice or just like a,
I'm sure it was just pretty girl 1980s.
Nice.
Nice. Just nonsense. But were you guys a big fan of Nintendo's games in general in the arcades?
They were weird because there would be like Punch-Out and Mario Brothers.
Yeah.
But you also had those at home around the same time, but they were like different versions. And that's something that happened a lot in the arcade. Like, you'd go to the arcade to see the latest in game technology. Like, you would be blown away. Like, Daytona USA shows up. You're like, whoa, look at those cars. It looks incredible.
Yeah.
And then you're like, I hope it comes to one of the consoles.
And doesn't suck.
And it comes to the console, and it's like, yes, it's got the same name on the box and similar characters or, you know, concepts, but it's just a lower quality. So... yeah, it would be weird you'd go to arcades to see the newest things and maybe even the future of video games to a degree, right? Like this is probably what the next generation of games might look like, or maybe 2 generations down the road, you know, before we really had polygonal graphics in arcades.
Well, I mean, I think about I when I saw Super Mario in the arcades and then of course the NES, I was, you know, at that time it was like, these are like arcade graphics come home kind
Right.
of thing. I mean, that was a big deal at that moment. Particularly for me though, like growing up as a 2600 kid, kind of ColecoVision kid, like ColecoVision had a great version of Donkey Kong. It was kind of bad on Atari, but Pac-Man was notorious because it was such a bad version of Pac-Man that eventually made to those. But so you definitely went to the arcade because it was the premier experience.
Right.
I do remember basically Super Mario being like one of the few times I was like, wow, you can actually have an arcade game at home. Was when you had the NES with Super Mario.
Right.
And Punch-Out ended up being better on NES than the wireframe arcade version.
Yeah. I know that's on Switch now. I've never really played too much of that arcade Punch-Out.
It was okay, but
okay.
Like, I mean, the NES, I don't know which one came first actually, but the NES version was just way better.
I'm pretty sure the arcade came first.
I would imagine.
I'm pretty sure the arcade came first, and they just couldn't recreate that experience.
Thank goodness.
And they changed it to what was on the NES.
But yeah, Nintendo has so many of those weird cross releases where it's like, oh, in the arcade it's called Versus Balloon Fight or Versus Excite Bike. It's like, it seems like they are bringing a lot of their category over back in the day to that arcade scene as well. Yeah, it's confusing. And then like looking back into the history of Nintendo, especially in the arcade scene, like their first original game, according to this research, Space Launcher in 1979, and then like Sheriff was right after that.
I remember Sheriff.
Yeah, and Sheriff, you might know it as like, it's in the original WarioWare.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, the crappy looking sheriff guy, and you're shooting the numbers,
I think it's a
circling
Smash
around.
Brothers trophy too, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely an assist trophy at some point in there as well. But it's fun to look back on those early weirdo days of Nintendo where they're releasing versions of Othello in the arcade. It's just insane.
And there was a point too where they're like, we got to get in on this fighting game craze with, like Mortal Kombat's hot. We need something like that. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, with Rare and Midway and Nintendo, they released Killer Instinct in the arcade.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, look at this. This is, crazy, crazy, crazy. Like, especially for Nintendo, having like that skeleton character on the side of the arcade unit just seemed really out of character for them.
It was very scary for like kind of the Disney of video games.
Yeah, for sure. Reiner, number 4, what do you got?
Number 4. So when I'd go to arcades, it'd be a lot of competitive stuff. Like we'd always be like whether we're playing Moon Patrol or Galaga or something like that, it was competitive. Like you go to compete against your friends. And then in 1987, a game called Double Dragon showed up.
Ooh.
And all of a sudden we're like, we're buddies. Like we're playing together. We're working with a common cause to take down these bad guys. And it was such a game changer for the arcade that you used to just put one coin in and you'd just sit and hold the machine. But now it's like you want to play with your friend. Like, so you're waiting for duos to get done. Sometimes someone would die and then the guy'd be like, come in. And you're like, no. I'm going to play with my friend.
Oh, really? You're holding out. All right.
So yeah, you would sometimes, and those games could be long. Some people just keep pumping in quarters. So you'd wait a good 20 minutes sometimes to get on that unit to play Double Dragon. But yeah, I love that. And that just brought in a whole new era of like the beat 'em up genre, that, went on to like, the Simpsons arcade game,
Teenage Mutant
Turtles,
yeah.
X-Men, all that stuff. And those were always good fun. So it was a different type of arcade experience that kind of rose up from that for me.
So I would like to throw out a little Gauntlet. Do you know what
Yeah,
I mean?
I mean, Gauntlet was like
one
kind of
that
like
was
a
like one of the early, like you played with your
top-down
friends.
4-player.
Yeah. Just the biggest coin sink you could possibly imagine for all those.
yeah.
I'm not sure what year did first Gauntlet come out. It's got to be
84?
It's got to be
Something
something.
like that?
I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I absolutely loved Double Dragon. for
Double
that
Dragon.
reason.
Good one. Andy, number 4, what do you got?
Well, you kind of blew it for me, Mr.
Perfect.
Hansen, because I was putting Donkey Kong at number
Great.
4 because Donkey Kong is basically one of the reasons I love Donkey Kong in the arcade. And I'll just kind of extrapolate on a little bit. Was that like it was super popular, so it was everywhere. So like every pizza joint you went with your family, and you're like, I mean, I'm sorry, mom and dad, if you're listening, I was like, I don't want to hang out with my family. Like I'm gonna go play Donkey Kong. So like Donkey Kong, I could play it like anywhere. Like whenever if you were annoying enough as a kid, your parents would be like, here's $5, go away. And Donkey Kong was definitely my go-to at that time. And I even remember just you talk about the old days in the way that we talked about things. I didn't know when I first played Donkey Kong because I was bad at it that there was people be like, have you ever been to like the pie factory, man. You're like, wait, what? You know what I mean? Like, there's different levels. Those are things that you would strive for to get to see, and then you'd get there and you'd be like, no way, and then like die immediately and be like, I need more money.
Saw a glimpse of heaven.
And so those were fun, and I eventually got very good at Donkey Kong, but it was one of those things that it was, I think, an amazing game that doesn't get enough kind of credit. It's a lot of fun. It's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, still holds up. In the future, I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of overlap going into the top. We should all just jump in. If somebody says yours, just jump in on the conversation there, and then we'll just skip it next go around. We got it.
No.
Okay. All right. That works too. All right. Kyle, number 4.
No, my number 4 is Time Crisis.
Interesting. All right. I'm glad we got it in there.
Yeah. I mean, I liked all those light gun shooters, like House of the Dead, stuff like that. But the first time, like, I really conceptually understood how Time Crisis worked, and like it wasn't that you were shooting off screen to reload, but that you had to use the pedal. I remember just like involuntarily like even leaning in and out and stuff like that, like really getting into it, like when you let off the pedal and you go out, you get into safety, like my body was like leaning out of the way because I was like so into the idea of like having control of my position in this like which is basically just like an on-rail shooter, So yeah, and I remember the gun would actually like cock when you shot it and stuff like that.
That's sweet.
And it was awesome. It was awesome. I like that. That was definitely like far and away like my favorite light gun shooter.
Yeah. Do you guys like light gun games?
Yeah, they were fine. A lot of times you'd be like, there'd be that moment of truth of putting your quarter in the machine, and it's like, I hope this is like synced up right. Like
oh really?
Yeah. A lot of times you just start shooting. It's like, this one's not working right. You got to kind of rapid fire to find out how you got to kind of point it at the screen.
And specific for Time Crisis, that cool action of the gun like actually moving, like only half of the guns would work. You'd be like, well, I think the one on the left is actually doing it. The one on the right doesn't work. And I don't think I ever saw a machine where both guns work perfectly. All
right, help me out. Time Crisis. Is it? I don't think I've ever played. Does it involve time travel? Why is it called Time Crisis?
I honestly don't even remember.
Isn't it a timer on the screen? Maybe.
Is it really?
Probably. But you know the concept of it, right? Like it's like like think of like your typical like sort of light gun shooter, but there's a pedal on the ground that you can press, and your character will actually move into cover. So it was basically like an on rails light gun shooter with a cover mechanic, which is really cool.
Yeah. And then, gosh, I remember that was a big influence then for. What was the Namco game with cover that then inspired Gears of War?
Kill Switch.
Yes, Kill Switch. I guess they said they were inspired by that game.
Oh, yeah, I can totally see that. Yeah, because like House of the Dead, you're on a track and you shoot off screen to reload, and you just hope that you. But here, I felt like there was actually an element of strategy because you could get into safety, which was awesome.
Gotcha. All right, number 4 for me. Gotta have a fighting game on there, and like I'm sure someone's gonna mention Street Fighter 2 at some point. That's great, solid, can have a lot of fun, but I'm a sucker for like. Novel animations, over-the-top animations. Like there's a old arcade game called Martial Masters, which just has amazing animation. There's this just the idle animation for the drunken fighter.
This is your number 4?
No. Well, I'm getting to it. I'm getting to it.
Right.
But the animation for this drunken master is just incredible in Martial Masters. But going on the animation trend, and also with the tight gameplay of Street Fighter 2, going the first Darkstalkers.
Yeah.
It is so much fun. Every character is just ratcheted up to 11. Every animation, every move just looks over the top insane. And I guess like Capcom originally wanted the Universal monsters, couldn't get it, so they made their own. And so it's just, hey, here's insane, here's Frankenstein.
Well,
here you got basically like Ryu, but he's also a vampire.
There was like the mummy character who was like towered over everybody else.
He's
like that's
so
who I always
huge.
went with.
Yeah, and there's also like a Yeti Sasquatch character that's also just massive, just beating the crap out of each other.
It's just weird. It was one that I remember. It's not on my list, but it was at my skating rink.
Oh.
But I do remember that just kind of like it's standing out among the row of machines just because the characters and animation were so insane.
Totally. And I didn't know that apparently they made a TV show based on Darkstalkers.
Really?
And one of my favorite characters in the game is Lord Raptor, who's this dumb, like, rocker zombie guy. I looked up, apparently in the lore of Darkstalkers, he was performing at a rock concert, and then he decided to kill himself and 100 of his fans. That's just the character lore. He's pretty cool. But anyway, he's like this badass Australian rocker, and he's got a guitar, and he's wailing on it, just flames and spikes coming out of everywhere. He's got, like blades that spin up out of the ground. He's sweet. But then I found a clip from the TV show where Lord Raptor there decides to start rapping because it's like 1994.
It's in his name.
They try and turn him into like some Jim Carrey style character. He's just over the top, wow, and he's like rap. It is Embarrassing. So I don't know if I can play as a Raptor anymore.
To watch? Was it painful?
Yeah, it really was. It was rough.
Sorry.
All right, Reiner, number 3. What do you got?
Number 3 should be number 1 on everybody's list. Ms. Pac-Man.
Correct.
Is it on anybody else's list?
Number 1.
Yeah. I'm putting it at number 3. I'm kind
He
of.
said to go in.
got it.
My list is ruined.
Oh, Brian Shea, ladies and gentlemen.
Kind of going off Kyle's list. My next 2 are more personal.
Yeah.
As my personal favorites. But yeah, that game, like Pac-Man was big when it came out, like really big. But Ms. Pac-Man like kind of perfected that formula, and really like that's a game when you'd show up to arcade at open sometimes, and it would just be a line of people going over to that. And the arcade's noisy. There's machines everywhere, but people are just waiting to play that one game.
Yeah.
And you talk about competitions, like scoring competitions.
Insane.
You'd spend a day at the arcade just trying to get at the top of the list. Like I'd hang out there like 6 hours, 7 hours sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
You know, just
Holy
bouncing
hell.
from different machines, but always kind of circling back, like, where am I at?
Right.
Fourth. Oh, I can't beat Bob.
The obvious thing
Bob's
is
really
like,
good.
you know, it still holds up so well. I mean, I'm sure everyone has played 1,000 hours of Pac-Man. Just to appreciate that, like, it's tough not to argue that it's just maybe the greatest game of all time. Just design-wise, it's so tight, so perfect.
Yeah.
Andy, why do you like it?
Well, both Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man are just brilliant. I mean,
Yeah.
they're fun. They're always fun. They're simple. It works at almost every level, I feel like, and the fact that I can go back and I can play it today, and it just makes me happy. You know what I mean? It just simply makes me happy. It is a great arcade game that's fun to play. I don't get, when I die or run out of health or whatever, I'll be like, yeah, banana stage. Awesome. Do it again. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't make me angry ever. It's just a fun game to play.
Yeah.
It's one of those games where it's like, it's really peaceful and serene at first. You're just like, okay, munching pellets, everything's good. And it's like, okay, it's getting really intense. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're good again. You know, the ebb and flow of it is remarkable.
It's got everything you need. And I was a little bit unclear because I mainly just played Miss Pac-Man about the difference between Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man. But looking it up, it's like different Ghost AI, smarter Ghost AI. The fruit moves in Miss Pac-Man, different cutscenes, obviously. And like
She's faster too, right? Isn't she?
I don't know.
Oh,
I don't know about that. But I didn't know the crazy history of Miss Pac-Man. Like, Kyle, did you know that it was made by a couple of MIT dropout guys?
Miss Pac-Man?
Miss Pac-Man.
No.
Ms. Pac-Man.
Get it right, dude. It's Ms.
Come on,
Pac-Man.
guys.
Excuse me.
But yeah,
There's a
I had no
story
idea.
there.
So like, obviously it came from Namco originally with
Yeah.
the original Pac-Man. And then this group from MIT, as they were dropping out, they were creating, enhancement kits for different games. Or just like weird mods back in the day where, hey, you'd attach
weird.
in the arcade and you could change the speed on different games, stuff like that. And it started out with them making just a varied version of Pac-Man that they called Crazy Otto. And so this version of Pac-Man had like the smarter AI and all the features that Miss Pac-Man would have, except it starred the most hideous looking Pac-Man you can imagine, where it's like Pac-Man with legs and the ghosts are all funky looking. And then eventually they coordinated that through Midway, who had to deal with Namco, and then said, okay, you officially have the license, you can make Miss Pac-Man. Although the original design for Miss Pac-Man then had like flowing red hair, just super gross looking. And then eventually got sanctioned as just the Miss Pac-Man.
So the original Pac-Man creator really
Yes.
ultimately he didn't have anything to do with Miss Pac-Man, I guess?
At least in their version of the story, no.
Weird.
I mean, it's a great story, but I mean, like the core game mechanic is
Oh,
from
yeah.
Pac-Man.
Oh, yeah,
You know
it's
what I
still
mean?
95% Pac-Man.
I
Yeah,
had just
yeah.
always assumed that was just after the success of Pac-Man. Was it Iwatani? That might not be the right name.
It is, yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay. I just assumed he was like, all right, time for a sequel. And
Right.
he made Miss Pac-Man. I'd never occurred to me that it was made by an entirely different group.
Yeah, apparently they originally wanted to call it Super Pac-Man, but then I guess they decided to make it a lady based on one of the characters in Crazy Otto. They said that like there was a cutscene where Crazy Otto meets somebody and they're like, that character design's so cool, let's make that the star of the game. And then there's the big
right.
debate about, you know, is it Miss Pac-Man? Is it Mrs. Pac-Man? Because there's a scene where they make a Pac baby and you don't want to have kids out of wedlock back in the 80s. It wasn't cool, everybody. So weird history for that thing, but still so much fun for high score chases. Totally with you. Where are we? Andy, number 3?
Andy, number 3, yeah.
My number 3. I put, I think, a classic that takes all the good parts about a lot of arcade games, and that is NBA Jam.
Yeah, there we go.
You knew it was going to come from somebody in the top 5. I mean, NBA Jam was so fun. Part of it was that anywhere you play it. Obviously it came on to consoles later. It was still fun there, but getting shoulder to shoulder with everybody at the arcade, I thought was the way to play it. And obviously there's different versions that came out post, but the original NBA Jam was just a blast and one of the best arcade games.
I think it was. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brian.
It's one of the few one of those experiences where you'd actually punch in your initials and it would remember you.
Ooh.
At that time I was like, oh man, I'm going to go all the way up the ranks. I'm going to take down, I don't remember who the number one team was at that time, the Bulls or
probably the
Lakers or something like that. Yeah. But it was like, you start out, taking on the T-Wolves and stuff like that, and then you work your way up. So it had progress that continued on, which is great.
Yeah, it's wild. Still so fun. And I remember when we had Tim Kitzrow, is that the name of the announcer? I believe on the podcast a little while ago. I had no idea that the Boom Shakalaka thing had this weird path where it originally was from a Sly and the Family Stone song, I believe, and then it came through Stripes where Bill Murray tweaked the Sly and the Family Stone song a little bit, and then it was inspired by Stripes and then put into NBA Jam, and now it's just become, of course, Boom Shakalaka. It's just a phrase everybody knows. So stupid.
Yeah, because for our 300 stuff recently, I went through and just looked at all of our covers. We had NBA Jam on the cover 3 times within 2 years.
Really? How does that happen?
There was an arcade version.
It was the biggest game at the time.
Yeah.
It was a juggernaut.
We were just starting to make magazines. NBA Jam was big. You put the big game on the cover, right? And that's just what we did.
Big game on the cover with big editor-in-chief on the cover, too.
That's it. That's
Doing a big slam dunk.
There is that.
I think within the last 2 or 3 issues, Bert's did a big classic on NBA Jam.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Kyle, number 3?
Number 3. Okay, so this would be, I imagine we probably all have a fighting game, and mine's maybe a little weird because it's not Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter. I didn't really have access to those, but I did have a convenience store that I could walk to that had Killer Instinct.
Oh, interesting.
So I played a ton of Killer Instinct with my brother, and the thing that I remember being really sort of engaged with, because we brought it up earlier, we're talking about the scary skeleton on the side. It was a scary fighting game because Fulgore was. I never really thought of Mortal Kombat as scary for some reason. I don't know why.
Just laughable.
I guess, yeah. But Fulgore, I thought was just this terrifying creature, and then it was early. It was you were just starting to hear mutterings of the N64, and a big part of Killer Instinct was it would have this big Mega or Ultra 64 logo ahead of it, and it was,
really? It had that in the game,
and that was this weird tease for what would eventually become the Nintendo 64. And I always looked at it, I was like, oh my god, this is what the Nintendo 64 is going to look like. These are what the games are going to look like that we have at home soon. And yeah, so that I connect the Nintendo 64 to that game weirdly because of that.
Because of that weird hype.
Yeah, Killer Instinct came out on Super Nintendo with a port.
Yeah, and they made Killer Instinct 2 for arcades. And they apparently they did port it to the Super Nintendo, but they never released it. They just tweaked it and it became gold for N64 later.
Oh, is that right?
Which is weird. Yeah.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
Okay. My number 3, 1982's Robotron 2084.
Yeah, it's a classic.
This is one of those games. I feel like there are a lot of listeners out there, viewers that are in the same camp, where it's a name you hear and you say, okay, it's some old arcade stuff, but this game holds up so well. I remember we did a classic in it. About it in GI maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and even back then you look at a screenshot and it's what is this? How much fun can it possibly be? But still to this day I think that game is awesome. I got into high score chases with Miss Pac-Man, and that's absolutely fantastic. And then Robotron is oh, this is almost like all the thrills of Miss Pac-Man, but just cranked up to 3,000. It is so intense and so brutal, and you will die so fast if you aren't on your game. But
it's twin stick, right? One of the
that's the thing.
Yeah.
Miss Pac-Man's more about thinking ahead, where the ghost might be going, where Robotron is just sheer reflex and skill of being able to take down the enemies as they're coming at you.
Yeah, if you love games like Geometry Wars, it's worth going back and taking a look at this. They released some midway collection on last gen that you can still check it out with, but it's funny listening to or hearing interviews with Eugene Jarvis, who we had on the podcast a little while ago, talking about how he had this eureka moment of oh wait, yeah, dual analog sticks, dual joysticks. I think this could work. So you can move and shoot. And just to have that epiphany and just have it completely change the gameplay and still in 2018 have it feel so good. It's just unreal.
There's a lot of games that have ripped off of Robotron and Smash TV.
Yeah.
Those kind of those early games in that vibe. But I agree. Robotron's a classic.
Yeah. And it looks like shit. It sounds like
Actually, I actually don't think it does because it's got that cool vector look to it that I actually really like. I like that it has
Old
a style
school
to it.
sci-fi.
Yeah.
It's just the most gamey ass game, just boiled down to its essence, you know? Leo Vader in the booth recently played an unhealthy amount of it in a high score tournament. How'd that go, Leo?
It was amazing. Yeah, it was. I totally had written that game off in the past. I thought I really understood what it was, but getting in the high score chases was really satisfying, and just getting boxed in a corner and barely escaping, and everybody around you is just yelling.
Get the family! That wife's getting away! The dad's bringing his briefcase to the other side of the screen!
Yeah, that game definitely has those moments where you just kind of like close your eyes to some degree, dig into a corner, and hope you come out the other side, and you're like, I did it! Yay! Yeah.
Just timeless.
It's so aggressive in its vibrancy and just the sounds of that thing. It'll just blast your face off, but it's so awesome. Anyways, Ryder, number 2.
Number 2, Kyle, you said you got to have a fighting game. I'm going with, as Hanson pointed out, Super Street Fighter 2.
There we go. Okay.
Just one of the best mechanically, still to this day, fighting game experiences that you can find. Some of the coolest characters in gaming too. Just a nice rounded roster, allowing people different strategies, different approaches to how you play it, and they kept tweaking that one version. That's something you didn't see often in the arcades. Was like there was Street Fighter 2, and then there was Super Street Fighter 2, and there was Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, where they just kept making that one game better, opposed to moving on to like the sequels.
Tweaking or milking? How would you phrase that?
Tweaking, I think.
Okay.
Fans wanted it at the time. It was big.
Well,
People
you
wanted
think
that.
about it. No matter what, you're going to have someone putting a quarter in your machine. They would just replace it with a better version. So yeah, I thought that was great. Because usually the arcades, you wouldn't have both of them there. It would
They'd swap.
Yeah, they'd swap it
Did
out.
the original Street Fighter ever come out in arcades? Because I know it was like on
Street
Turbo.
Fighter 1? No.
Yeah.
Street Fighter 1 was in arcades.
It was, okay.
Yes.
I never saw it, yeah. But was it an arcade game or was it a side-scrolling?
Yes, the original is.
What am I thinking of?
I'm thinking of Final Fight.
Or no, there's like a Street Fighter
Well, there's-
2050 or something.
Oh, that
Oh,
weirdo
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
That was like a
Ken
side-scrolling action
Okay.
game or
'Cause
something.
It was called. Was
Yeah.
it not? Wasn't it called Fighting Street for like Turbo Graphics or something? But
I don't remember. Yeah.
Did you? Was that?
I have played the original Street Fighter in an arcade.
Okay.
And I also played it on Turbo, which is where I got the most familiar with the original Street
Yeah.
Fighter. Was there?
Okay.
Well, like, was it? I don't know if you guys have the frame of reference for this, but like, was 2 a big deal? Like, oh, this is the sequel to that great game, or did 2 just totally stand on its own?
Street
disconnected
Fighter,
from
the
first
original,
game?
is not considered like people weren't
Yeah.
like blown away by it, right? It's like the roots of a lot of the like control ideas.
that like 2 that one on
It had like Ryu and guys like that in
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it hadn't taken that next leap yet. I mean, I'm going a little off memory here, but I think it had like the fireball in it, but like the controls were really wonky and it was
Yeah.
really hard to like do a fireball, right? Even
Yeah.
though you'd like look on the side and go like, okay, I got it. I'm going to do this. It was not easy to do.
Yeah.
Not impossible, but it was definitely less forgiving, right? Or maybe just not as fluid
Yeah.
as Street Fighter 2 eventually is. So I don't remember at the time, like people, because I didn't really hear about Street Fighter, the original, until Street Fighter 2 blew up and then went back to learn more about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was it like to be in that scene when Street Fighter 2 was at its peak? I mean, was just everyone talking about it? You just had to go and just try and master one character as best as you could? Do you remember any stories from back in those days?
I mean, I was not very good at the arcade, and I found it frustrating. I mean, once again, it was a great thing. We went to Project 1v1 with like Randy Pitchford was talking about that new game they're doing where they're trying to
the
recreate
Gearbox
that kind of quarter experience. And I loved his story around it because it is true. I do remember those days of like going to the arcade and you'd like, hang over someone's shoulder, breathing heavily on them while they played Centipede because your quarter was next. You didn't want anybody to take your quarter. Hey man, that's my quarter. Don't touch my quarter.
Right.
I mean, like as you lined up quarters to play the next game, and Street Fighter was I mean, there were people who were good, right? And I mean, like within a week, even for Mortal Kombat, there was people out there that were out there hustling. Like they wanted you to put in their quarter for them to kick your ass, right? And I didn't find that very fun. So I really got into those games a lot more at home.
Yeah.
Like, Street Fighter on Super Nintendo was where I learned how to play. I actually had someone, it was really funny, a guy who worked at Funko way back in the way. He was like, hey, you want to play it? And we played, and I think he beat me. I mean, he might have beat me like 99-1, right? I mean, he was just like whooping my butt. He was so good at the game, but I was like trying to get better, and then eventually just kind of looked at me and goes like, do you want to do you want to start talking about what's going on here now? And I was like, yeah. And so he started to like kind
It's
of
just silence up until that point.
like deconstruct the
100
game for me a
rounds.
little bit and start to understand, like, to get that, because I had, read strategy guides or read other things about it to try to understand it. But it wasn't until I got like a really like, hey, let me explain to you how this works, or why you use, Guile's slow sonic boom at this point, and how you use corner traps and how you get out of corner traps, like all those kind of things that are defined, like they're expected out of any fighting game now. This was stuff that like was not defined, right? People weren't like, oh yeah, corner traps. I mean, like people didn't know what was going on.
Right.
There were people who had gone to that first level,
Yeah.
and they knew them. And when they knew them, it was like, this is a slaughterhouse, right? And it wasn't just a question of speed or could you do an uppercut to get out. You had to do the right uppercut, and you had to do everything at certain moments. And I think that's what Street Fighter innovated on and changed the world on.
It brought a lot of
So-
strategy. Like, whereas these
Yeah.
other games we're talking about, it was very much like, that was a good run. You'd discuss that a little bit, like, oh, I narrowly escaped. Whereas Street Fighter, it was like, I used the middle attacks on this guy. Like he was going
Right.
with the slower stuff. I went in the middle range, or I exploited the fifth hit zone. Like stuff like that didn't really exist at the time. So you would have more discussions of that, and you'd actually study how people were playing, just like you do today, and any fighter or any even Fortnite. Like, oh, that guy's a builder. You kind of had that element. Whereas, before that, it was more just about luck and, reflex and skill, like
Right.
figuring out how to beat those Pac-Man stages, or, like you said, Robotron or Defender, stuff like that.
No, they've definitely taken the chess to the next level. Like, I mean, like the fighting game chess had really
Right,
moved,
right.
like Street Fighter 2 moved it forward. And I think that's, at the time, that was the conversation. And I think that's why everyone wanted to know it, because everyone wanted to learn how to be. It was one of those first games that like back in the day, they used to sell like books that would teach you how to be good at Pac-Man, like teach you like what the patterns were and things like that to try to like beat Pac-Man. It was really hard to memorize those patterns, and it was like, but this is one of the first games where it was like, here's a character, learn the basics, and then start to learn what the advanced techniques are. And I think that was, at least at the time, in my opinion, it was one of the deepest games I think I'd seen it. Maybe,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, as far as like depth in a control of a single character, just like as a solitary piece. I mean, obviously I know there were big giant RPGs that did a lot of things, but I mean, just as a single character to have so much depth was astounding.
And I remember just the mind game on the character select screen. Whereas if you saw someone like kind of slowly going over the characters, you'd be like, you're done. But if they immediately would like go scroll over and select Blanca or something, you're like,
Yeah.
uh-oh.
It's
Like,
gonna be a
it's
nightmare.
on, right?
Right,
It just
right.
raised the intensity right there.
Oh God.
Such a good game.
I always fall into that trap too of like, all right, I know how to do Hadouken here. I think I can handle anybody because I can do a couple of special moves, and you just get slaughtered if you try and rely only on just trying to show off your cool moves that you memorized. Yuck. Wait, Andy, number 2.
Andy's number 2.
Oh, Galaga.
Oh, great. Okay.
Galaga is a game that I will love forever. It is a classic. The ability to like kind of go to that next level where you can like, they can steal your ship, which for a long time I was like, don't steal my ship. And then you're like, oh, they stole my ship. And then you get you get the 2. It just has like, I think, some interesting strategies. I like the kind of bonus stages. It was a game that actually, when I was a kid, one of my friends' parents, and I don't even really understand why, but they had one, and it was like in their
What?
garage. So we could-
Millionaires? What the hell?
That's what it felt like at the time. I mean, when we were kids, we were like, nobody owns an arcade machine, right? And they had it in their garage, and we would go over and we'd play so much Galaga, and it's just, I thought I loved it because I got to play it for free so much.
Yeah.
But I know now that it is just a classic. It is an amazing game. And
What does it look like? Give me the layout of Galaga here.
It's kind of.
Space.
It's basically.
Got it.
It's
I'm there.
basically like it's kind of. It's a take on Space Invaders, right? That just kind of took it to the next level as far as like graphics and things like that go.
Added a lot of color.
Added a lot of color, right? Obviously, because originally there wasn't a lot of color in
Yeah.
the Space Invaders, but and just that kind of strategy of using different ships in the bonus stages, and like, but it was just a field of things. But they would assault you. They weren't just like static, so like moving back and forth. They would like split off
Okay.
and come after you to
gotcha.
kind of like add more action on the screen. And yeah, I mean, I definitely, if I had an arcade at my house and I had the room, Galaga would be one of my games.
Andy, you could probably afford a Galaga.
I can't. The problem is with arcade games, we even have that here at work when we have them. It's a space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, you know what I mean? Like that's the worst part. And of course Galaga made its appearance at the front of Ridge Racer. Was it like the loading screen?
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Just to kind of throw in a little other bit there for you. But Galaga's a great game. Amazing game.
Yeah.
Definitely. I put that above Tempest, which I adore. So that's how much respect I have for Galaga. It's a great game.
Man,
great,
you'd
great
feel
game.
so bad if you missed a ship in the bonus sections. Like you have to get.
Well,
those.
you knew your score was doomed if you didn't set
It's
everything
like,
up
it's
right.
It's just
Right.
like I might as well just give up.
Just walk away.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
It's crushing.
But
On
you can pull off some like good numbers still, and you get back and you get deeper. It's like
Second
it's
ship,
like,
yeah.
but you definitely want to get that double ship early on and abuse it for as long as you can.
Yeah.
And so it's a good game.
On the arcade space front, like this weekend, I was trying to go to an arcade repair store in Minneapolis because I'm like, what is that scene like? I want to know what's actually going on in there. And that one was closed, so I went to a runner-up where they're basically just selling MAME machines and stuff, which is still okay. And they had a Daytona cabinet there for $200, but the catch was that you couldn't take it apart. So it's like, hey, $200, you can have this, and like, one of the camera buttons is broken, but you can drive this car. Won't it be cool? It was really tempting, even though you couldn't fit it through a door. It's like maybe there's some garage somewhere I can shove this Daytona cabinet in.
Oh, is it a seater? Like
yeah. It's
okay.
a full car seat thing. It's
Maybe
just
an
a beast.
employment office.
Oh, actually, yeah. They could have just put it in the
right
lobby
there,
of Game Informer.
Just
or
right there,
something.
that one spot.
Yeah, we could
Because we need more junk at Game Informer. That's
we
what
don't
we
even.
need.
We have arcade cabinets at Game Informer.
I know.
In 8 years, I've seen them turned on twice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why don't we play those more?
Because we have other
busy.
games.
Because we're busy.
It's
Yeah,
time
I
to
know.
finally review Gauntlet up there,
Yeah.
man. It would be fun to someday do something with that. I don't know if it's like a live stream where we can just zoom in on the monitor. Do something with that arcade space at Game Informer because it's crazy underused.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's we have a lot of games. We got a lot of games to play.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah,
so.
that's the problem.
Kyle, number 2.
Kyle, number 2 is
Mr. Do.
no, I don't even know what that is. The Star Wars Trilogy arcade. I don't know if you guys.
This
remember
isn't like the Vector arcade.
that. No, this is
Okay.
like so it came out right around. I don't know if it was before, but right around when the special edition movies were coming out.
Right.
Which I was really into. Like I was there
course.
day one for all 3 of those like re-releases.
It's huge.
And Star Wars Trilogy arcade was like, you get in, you sit down, there's one joystick, and it had 2 levels from each of the films, and then 2 bonus levels where one was where you'd fight Darth Vader, and one was where you'd fight Boba Fett.
Okay.
And it was weird because the way it worked was like you used the joystick for on-rail shooting for a couple levels. Sometimes you used it as an aiming reticle while you're flying your X-wing. But the most awesome ones were when you got to use the lightsaber. And so like you would use the joystick to like bounce shots back at Boba Fett or attack
Really?
Darth Vader.
It wasn't
and
a
stuff like
button.
that.
It was actually on the joystick.
Yeah, I mean there was a button on the joystick.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And apparently you could even turn the lightsaber off if you wanted to. Like,
That's awesome.
yeah, and
it's such a weird little detail.
and it is one of, I think of maybe only 2 arcade games where like I just sat down and just used all my money and beat it. Like I completed that game, and it's awesome. It's really cool.
This is your money, not your parents' money.
I guess my parents' money, if you want to be technical.
Allowance.
Allowance at Aladdin's
Allowance.
Castle was the arcade that I played it at. I remember.
That's a really good name.
But yeah, I loved. It was at the time like the best looking version of like playing through all the films in one shot.
Totally.
Yeah,
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I love that game a lot.
My number 2, Miss Pac-Man. Already covered it. Reiner, number 1 arcade game of all time.
Star Wars Arcade, the original vector
really?
graphics. Like I grew up adoring Star Wars, right? So seeing that in the arcade, I was just like, I'm shooting TIE fighters in an X-wing, and then you're along the side of the Death Star, and it's like, this is bonkers.
I mean,
It's
it was
crazy.
It was
And you
the
got
first
Obi-Wan
interactive
like
trench
talking
run,
to you,
right?
like use the Force, and you're like, I'm totally gonna be
Well,
Luke Skywalker.
You say use the words. How did it actually sound though?
Dude, whoa.
But it was more like,
Dude, it worked. It counted.
oh, it's so rough with the
But-
voice samples.
and
It's
then you go
hilarious.
into the trench run, like that was remarkable.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is just all wireframe graphics, but it looked like Star Wars. Like you were there, you were doing that stuff, and it had the coolest thing for a bonus of the use of Force bonus points was just firing at nothing but the exhaust ports. So that was really
really?
hard. You know, you'd have stuff coming along in the trench with you, and yeah, if you just did that, you'd get bonus points for that. The
That's
game's
sweet.
Freaking awesome.
It is really, really cool. Even to look at now, if you've never seen it, look up gameplay videos because I don't think
Yeah.
they ever re-released it anywhere, did they?
I think they
Rebel Assault for the GameCube, you could unlock it.
Oh,
Which I remember it was on the back of the box. That was a big deal that like it had the full arcade game on there.
That's awesome.
That's the first way I played it.
Yeah, and I
was
had it
that
on
game.
Atari 5200. It was okay. But that arcade unit, you'd sit down in it, you'd be secluded. Like, oh, this is so good.
Yeah. Speaking of re-releases, I was looking up Robotron stuff. I didn't play enough of this game to find it, but apparently in LEGO Dimensions, there's a Robotron level where you're Gandalf and Batman on the Robotron plane taking on like Robotron enemies, and every time you complete a wave, it does like the Robotron transition, and then go to the next one and you just throw in more dumb LEGO characters.
Is it like you play dual analog? Like you played the rest?
No, it seemed like you're like stuck on this 2D plane, but then you're still using like your batarang to like take out these enemies. It's weird, man. The video game industry is weird. Andy, number one.
We already went through it. That was Miss Pac-Man.
There we go, Miss Pac-Man, the classic. All right, Kyle, what do you got?
My number one was
Kangaroo.
All these games. I don't know what these games are, Reiner. They just sound like made up things. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game.
There we go. Okay.
Which, if I played it, I eagerly bought it the day it was re-released on Xbox 360 Live Arcade. I was like, this is not fun.
Never do that. Don't try and rekindle the past.
But man, yeah, I remember going to like a birthday party and just like, you know, everyone got their sort of here's your little stack of tokens. I used every single one on Ninja Turtles. I didn't look at anything else. I loved Ninja Turtles at the time. It looked exactly like the cartoon. It had like when you beat levels, you got like they weren't cutscenes, but you got to see these big like beautiful images of the Ninja Turtles doing like crazy things. I adored that game. I went to Up Down to research for this podcast, and that was like one of the first things I played. And even still, it's like, this isn't really like a good game.
No.
Like all those I struggle with all those like beat 'em ups, but it's just like the nostalgia I have for that specific arcade machine is just undeniable. Totally. Just like, and also the art on the cabinet, they had like people in bad Ninja Turtle costumes and like, then there was like one real human person.
Is it April O'Neil?
Yeah. In fact, you know what? I don't think they were in costumes. It was one April O'Neil human person and drawings of the Ninja Turtles, and it just was like awkward and weird looking, but I loved it. It was awesome.
Yeah. But like of all the genres, like those brawlers, those beat 'em ups, like they are rough to go back to. They're so mindless.
And it's especially if you remove that sort of like profitable angle of it. If it's like, oh, they're just trying to get you to pump quarters in this machine, you realize just like how broken it is.
Not Double Dragon, man. Still holds up.
You're right. That's a classic. Who's your character in TMNT?
Donatello.
Of course.
I like the wide reach.
Yeah, I liked Leonardo with the swords.
Yeah, he was the middle ground guy. And then the other weird thing that I always remembered is Michelangelo's buttons were yellow, even though he was always the orange Ninja Turtle, which that was like my earliest example of me being like a super fan and being like, oh, this is all wrong.
Writing letters to Konami. You blew it. You're disrespecting fans.
Yeah. And then there's the NES port, which I remember being very disappointing because it just looks nothing like it. But,
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, I have a lot of love for that game.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp. But number one is a game that I'm just too nostalgic for. Like my favorite game that I would play as a kid, just all the time at our arcade, which like we had an arcade in the middle of nowhere in Minnesota, but it was at just like this lake, Games Lake out there in central Minnesota. And there was just this arcade, and the shining star of this arcade was Sunset Riders. This
great game.
Yeah, it's great. And so 4 cowboys going in, riding into town, being cool, then just Technicolor bullets flying at you. But like, I still think that gameplay holds up better than the average in that vein. Like, it is interesting. Like, you're jumping on multiple planes. Yeah. There's like the bonus stages where you're shooting the cowboys around the edges.
It's much more fun to shoot than it is to like punch people in those kind of games, I think.
And they do fun stuff to change it up. Like, you know, you're riding your horses in some levels, or like, you know, a platforming along a train, or even in the first level when they have like herds of bulls running at you and you have to like run on top and then jump to the next one and stuff like that.
Genius.
I love it, man. Great. Even if, you know, the arcade version especially, a little racially insensitive. Some of those boss characters, it's like, oh boy, I don't know how you can proudly display this in your barcade these days. It's like, Chief Scalpum isn't holding up too well. Oh, good. Still, the director...
Still amazing game.
Amazing game. The director, Sugimoto, I guess he's like a programmer in the original Contra. He went on to direct Super Contra. And also the game's composer went on to compose Metal Gear for MSX.
Oh, wow.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, it's weird Konami history. And as far as I can tell, I think that director's still at Konami, where he's now working on Pro Evo, of course.
Okay.
It's such a weird world, man.
Very similar games.
Yeah, basically the same skill set moving on. That was just a clip from a larger show called The Game Informer Show. You can find it on iTunes, Google Play, or GameInformer.com. We take the fun opportunities and exclusive information from Game Informer magazine and boil it into a show that airs every Thursday with exclusive cover story information, developer interviews, a lot of fun stuff. So come love games with us.